The car is finally all-wheel drive. Introducing the world's first all-wheel drive Chevrolet Cruze with 525 wheel horsepower. Let's go. If you're new to the channel, I'm Matt. Let's fire the car up after a lot of work and see if we can get all four wheels spinning. But if you are new to the channel, how did we get to this point? Let's do a quick recap. In this video, we start an all-wheel drive conversion on the Chevy Cruze 1.8 turbo project. Welcome back. If you're new to the channel, I'm Matt. Let's go ahead and kick this project off and go and pick up some parts to start this all-wheel drive conversion. Let's go. I've got a U-Haul trailer to, essentially I'm going to the junkyard, found an all-wheel drive tracks. They have the subframe, the rear CV axles, the differential, drive shaft. I think the transfer case on this one might be damaged. I would need the driver's side, or excuse me, passenger side CV axle. However, this is a front end collision car. Not a big deal. I can always source that online on eBay. Even though initially I was looking online for all this stuff on eBay, I still needed that subframe. So I called some local guys up and they're like, we'll give you everything for 500 bucks. 500 bucks! With all that stuff in my cart in eBay, it was closer to 2 grand. So I'm like, 500 bucks, I'll be there. Once I got all the parts home from the junkyard, they needed good cleaning. Ugh, they were filthy. So I went ahead and power washed all the parts. Got them nice and clean-ish. And then I started mocking up the rear subframe that holds in the rear differential. And it was pretty damn close. It just needed about 3/4 of an inch removed. Welded back together and bolted right up, like Chevy meant for it to be. Welding's fun. It was in time to try and see if the all-wheel drive rear subframe would work with the Chevy Cruze. However, it did not, but the stock Chevy Cruze had the same openings for the axles. So I went ahead and mocked up the rear differential, and I thought, well, let me try swapping out the torsion tube to see if we can get some clearance around that rear differential. We went ahead and tacked everything together, tossed it in the car, and it still would not clear. So we had to undo all that work and use the Cruze trailing arms, which I know fit. Then I mocked up the gas tank from the all-wheel drive tracks. It didn't fit either. I designed some mounting tabs for the front of the rear differential that we could weld into the chassis, and I had to come up with a completely different torsion beam design. We sent all that over to Sin Cut Sin, and I designed a transfer case to the engine block mount. We need that support there. Here's the difference between the tracks and the Chevy trailing arms. The tracks has quite the kick up on it, so it's just not going to work at all. Seeing as the only difference between the opening for the Chevy Cruze and the tracks was just about 1/4 of an inch difference, I thought, well, let's go ahead and open it up and use the stock Chevy Cruze trailing arms. It's almost like it was meant to be. So I went ahead and mocked up the trailing arms into the car, and we had about 1/4 to 1/2 inch gap. Our new torsion beam design from Sin Cut Sin finally came in, so it was time to puzzle piece it together, tack it up, and fully weld it up. We then had to cap off the old trailing arm torque tubes. That way we can weld in our new torsion beam design. I'm gonna grind down some of these little high spots here. And while we're at it, we needed the correct transmission to work with all this. And weeks later, it finally arrived all the way from the UK, London. It's the same transmission, but has the output splines for the transfer case. I then proceeded welding up the mount point for the front of the differential. Tacked that up into the car. The next issue we had to address were relocating the shocks. You can see here how the stock mounting points for the shocks would just run into the CV axles. So we had to move them out slightly. The solution was just to fabricate some of our own tabs using generic universal tabs I found online. And we went to town welding those in and reinforcing those shock mounts. I think it came out pretty great. We then swapped out our stock springs for our ZZP units, which we got some time ago, because why not? We installed everything in the car, and success. Plenty of clearance. I then designed up some spacers for the rear CV axles to bolt up to the differential. Next, it was time to finally weld in our new torsion beam design here. And in order to make sure our wheels were nice and square, had the proper camber, angles, yada, 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 I went ahead and fabricated up a jig just to hold everything together. So I tacked in the torsion tube, yanked it out of the car, and fully welded it up. Weeks later, our 3D spacers came in just to test fit everything. They fit up quite nice, so it was time to send those out and have them machined. Then I installed the ZZP shocks that came along with the coilover kit, and bam! Our rear suspension and differential was all taken care of, for the most part. Because the tracks and the Chevy Cruze brake lines didn't play together well, I had to extend the brake lines. Bam! We then had to figure out a solution for our emergency brake cable, so we just used a ferrule and stop kit from Home Depot. Now it's time to dress up that rear suspension we put together, went ahead and cleaned it and painted it with a little Pour 15. Then our machine spacers came in. Oh, fantastic, they just look great. And we used some ARP hardware to secure it all down. Fit like a glove. Seeing as we couldn't use our stock fuel tank or the all-wheel drive fuel tank, we had to install a fuel cell. So why not upgrade it to handle 1500 horsepower? Came out quite nice. With the correct adapter plate, it was time to test fit the transfer case to the transmission. So we had to remove the two-wheel drive transmission, and while we're in there, why not go ahead and upgrade the clutch? So I had Spec make a twin clutch disc to hold all the power. Then we jammed the all-wheel drive transmission in there, and it was time to see where that transfer case would land. What do you know, it doesn't fit. Time for some more modifications. We needed to modify the floorboard, so, race car, why not just remove all the crap we don't need out of the interior? In order to make the transfer case fit, we had to remove the power steering. It was then time to start cutting up the floorboard.
Are you sure about that?
Now that we've got a nice big gaping hole here, let's go ahead and toss this transfer case in, shall we? Yes. Now that we got our transfer case in, it's time to fill that floorboard back in. We pieced everything back together, welded everything back up, in which my welds, they came out pretty decent, not too bad. We then seam sealed everything up, put a little epoxy primer down, and topped it off with some cheap rattle can paint. Oh, doesn't that look glorious? And just like that, the shifter and all the electronics were back in the car. I figured, while we're here, this limited slip differential isn't gonna do us no good if we're drag racing this thing. Boy, this little Amazon MIG welder, it really did its job at 220 volts. The next issue we had to address was our lower transmission mount, and we tried out a couple different units that would work with the tracks. Unfortunately, this had to be custom as well. And we created our own design that married the tracks and the Chevy Cruze design together. Next, we had to address our passenger side CV axle. The spline count was a little bit different on the Chevy tracks, so we just ended up switching out the cup that had the correct splines for our Cruze. Oh, we're getting somewhere, folks. Now it was time to make up a drive shaft. We also did a few different variations for the support that goes to the transfer case to the engine block, but more on that later. Next, we needed to create some adapters that would work with the output from the transfer case and the differential to work with the standard 1310 flange. We tried another option I thought would work. Nope, money down the drain. Lastly, we installed our ZZP coilovers up in the front. Are y'all caught up? Awesome. Let me show you where we're at with the car. Today's a big moment, boys and girls. Today's a big moment, boys and girls. We finally got all our machine parts in. So hopefully I did my job well. Everything fits. All right, let's check it out. All right, this thing was nicely packaged. Got 4 different parts in here. All right, transfer case to engine mount. You can already tell. Golly, thing's got some weight to it. Woo! Man, that is quite nice. Woo! This thing has got some weight to it. No way in hell this is gonna break. I've seen this thing so many times as a 3D printed model. To actually see it and feel it in real life as aluminum, it's just nuts. Got our threads all nicely tapped. Wow. There's our first part. This one should be our lower transmission mount. Woo! Dang, thing looks nice. Wonder why they give it a brush look. Not that I'm complaining. Oh, this better fit. I mean, we did a test piece, but just look at that. All designed by your boy. All right, this thing will be nice and beefy. No bushings here, just solid mounted. Very cool. Last but not least, are two adapters to go from the dip and the transfer case to our drive shaft. Wow, yep, everything I hoped it would be. They did a fantastic job. Golly, things are beefy. Okay, I'm gonna stop the video right there because as much as I wanted that transfer case support that holds the transfer case to the engine block, and as much time and money as I've spent developing that part,
so hopefully I did my job well,
still didn't fit. Still, I probably should have went ahead and ordered another 3D printed part, but I was like, surely this is going to fit. But it didn't. Let me show you the issues we're having. A couple issues. And I tried modifying this part just to make it work. These posts were a little too long. I shaved those off. We got it up in the car. But the main issue is these holes line up, but the angle of them are not correct. All the holes line up. The angle coming out of the block, because the block is tilted a little forward like that in relation to the transfer case. Once these were bolted up, there's probably about a good 20-degree difference in how the bolts go into the block. I'll continue developing this part. However, the next easiest solution was what you're about to see here. Let's get to it. Let's wrap this up. All right, we got our transfer case bracket in. Multiple trips to the hardware store to get the proper bolts. It's a very tight fit up under here, but there she is, all bolted up. Our lower transmission support bracket, ended up working out quite nicely. Bolts up fantastic. I did end up re-welding this back up. I know you saw in the earlier video, I cut this out to try and make some of those other brackets work. So we got this all bolted up, this re-welded back. We painted it, painted our bracket as well. I dropped our parts off at the drive shaft shop locally. And I fabricated a center support bracket. This used to be the old exhaust bracket that went from here to here. I'm thinking we can use this location here to end up making some sort of drive shaft safety hoop. Now our adapters, they need some more work. The bolt holes are slightly off because I used measurements online, which did not end up working out. However, what measurements I took off the output shaft on both sides worked out fantastic. So I have to have these machined again. However, because we are able to get a couple bolts in, we should be able just to make the wheels spin. They did a great job on this drive shaft. Hopefully we get no vibrations. I do think one of the things we're going to need to do, I'll get y'all a view looking that way, as well as this way. But one of the things I'm going to have to do is adjust the angle of the rear diff. It is not the same angle as the transfer case up there. So we do need to address that support bracket so we can raise the nose of this thing up a little bit. So this diff will have to come out. And one other thing that has happened behind the scenes that I did not film that ate up a bunch of time is when I was welding up those center support brackets for the drive shaft center support bearing. I was welding. I'm like, oh, okay. Checked on it, make sure everything was cool, nothing was catching on fire. Welded up one of the brackets on the passenger side completely, and this entire loom was on fire because it was underneath this little plastic part right there. There used to be a plastic piece that just completely covered this up. Well, that just happened to be where this bracket fell. You can tell it charted up pretty damn good. You can see some of the patch area where I fixed it up. This whole loop right here are all the wires that I fixed. I did make them a little bit longer because I went in the house and just started cutting links just to make things easy. It's been kind of hot outside. A couple of these wires got cinched. This whole section here I had to replace. Lots of wiring that I had to do in order to fix this thing all up. Still see some of the pieces and bits that I cut out. Just an absolute mess. That held me back quite a bit. But ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Everything is sorted. I changed and replaced all the fluids in the rear differential, the transfer case. We topped off the transmission. This is the first time I'll start the car after removing everything from it in order to lighten it up. So it's been a long time coming. So let's fire up the car, see if we can get all four wheels spinning. Not two, not three, but four. It's been a long time coming, a lot of hard work. So let's see if they all spin. We did it, boys and girls. We did it. Yes! There we have it, folks. It is officially the world's first all-wheel drive Chevy Cruze. I couldn't be more stoked about it. There are some things I still need to do. I need to address the adapters. I have those sent off to be machined. So when those adapters come back in, we'll have that ready to go. In the meantime, I think it's gonna take about 10 working days. I can adjust the angle of the rear differential, make sure it's the same angle as our transfer case up front, test to see if there's any vibrations or anything like that, and we'll do some of the first rips, all-wheel drive. Then it's race time, baby. Time to go back to the track, see what this thing will do, see if we cut down those 60-foot times. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is such an accomplishment, all the work that we've put in for the past, I don't know, 6 months or so. Totally been worth it. It'll be a lot of fun to get the car out, compete, have some fun. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up, share, subscribe if you haven't. If you're just watching, hit the subscribe button. Come on, help me out. Until next time, peace out. Peace out.